Yes, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, team. I hope you're having a beautiful start to the day. All right, we are going live across the universe, and we're going to be doing a podcast on diabetes. All right, so I hope you guys are having a wonderful, wonderful start to the morning. I'm going to make sure that we are live where we want to be. So if you're coming to this one, guys, you know what to do. Get down into the comments. Let us know you're here. We're going to be kickstarting this live off in 2 minutes, and we're going to be ready to rock and roll, guys. So if you're coming into this one live, let us know you're here. Do your thing. Tell us in the comments what's going on. How's your week going? And we're going to be starting this in 2 minutes. We are all about diabetes this morning, but not before a New South Wales victory. Let's fucking go. Oh, I'm so pumped about last night. So freaking good. So to everyone that watched the game, wowee. What a game, hey? Fucking finally. It's like once a decade New South Welshmen actually get to smile, right? So if you have no idea what we're talking about because you're not from Australia or you don't care about rugby league, I'm sorry. We're extremely chuffed about it. So let us know if you're here in the comments, guys. We're going to kickstart this in about 90 seconds. And if you've got any questions during the time that we're together this morning, of course, ask them in the comments, and I'm happy to answer anything live that I can, and we are good. Good morning, Ash. How are you, mate? Hello, Sean. Hesse. What's going on, girl? Good morning. Haven't seen you in that colour for a bit. Carls, I've been wearing this colour consistently ever since like 2 people in one day come up to me in the gym and told me that I'm looking younger. so I'm really milking that for what it's worth. Hey Xanth, what's going on, girlfriend? Guys, we're starting in 60 seconds. Ash, what's going on? You the blues. Yeah, I love it, totally. Good morning, Cara. How are you, babe? I hope you're having a beautiful start to the morning. Hello, Miss Sean Baker. What's going on, girlfriend? Look at the boys lining up. Maxie Hall, I hope you're recovering from your surgery well, bro. Tezza, good morning, champion. Guys, we are starting in 1 minute, and we're getting to rock and roll. Hello, Hamo. How are you, legend? I hope you're well, buddy. So, guys, if there's anything that you want me to cover that I don't cover in the pursuit of this podcast, then just please ask the questions, and then obviously I can hang around at the end and answer anything, okay? All right, we are getting ready to rock and roll here. I think we're good. All right, I'm going to bring in the Instagram crowd, and I think we're good to go. Okay, let's do it. Hello, JJ Lawrence. How are you, legend? I hope you're good, mate. Let's go, guys. On the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Better Body Academy podcast. This is the podcast that you come to when you're sick of the dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs. And yes, I have got a little kick in my step this morning. This is despite the fact that I've been up and awake since 2 o'clock a.m., then into meetings, then into the gym. I had to get up super duper early for the State of Origin Rugby League last night, and a victory was had. A once-in-a-decade feat. So I'm super pumped. Okay, so let's get into this podcast. What we're going to be talking about here is diabetes and insulin resistance. Now, you might have seen the topic and thought, this probably isn't relevant to me. But the truth is, this topic is relevant to at least half of the Western world. Yes, half of the Western world at any one point in time is suffering from either diabetes in its end stages or its early stages, which is called insulin resistance. I'm going to try to keep this podcast as simple as possible. Now, if you are really, really healthy and you don't suffer from either of these conditions, that's good. Listen up. You're going to be able to teach your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, or your kids about this condition, because this condition is the most preventable condition in the world, yet it probably up there with heart disease ranks as the biggest killer, the destroyer of quality life. I'm talking about being on dialysis, losing your eyes, getting amputated. But clearly it doesn't scare people. Now, I don't know, but my feeling is that because a lot of people don't actually understand what diabetes and what happens. That's my understanding. So they don't really take it seriously, and therefore it's not the biggest deal for them. Okay? So I'm going to try to tell you about the condition and tell you about its early onset where it's preventable, so that we can then reverse the process and set you up to never get it. How many people do you know with diabetes? I don't know. How many people do you know in your family? Have you had family members that have maybe been lost to diabetes? Here's the thing. Insulin resistance, which is the early stage of diabetes, often goes completely undiagnosed. People don't even know they have it. And it's not until they actually get to the point of having full-blown diabetes that they try to do something about it. Furthermore, people don't know how devastating it is. And as a dietitian or trainer, this makes me so damn sad because this condition is preventable. Yet it kills thousands upon thousands of people each year. So let me try to explain in the most possible, easiest possible way what it actually is. When you eat a food with carbohydrate in it, now most foods are a mix of different things. There's very few foods that are just one thing, okay? So when you eat food with a carbohydrate in it, carbohydrates lead to an increase in your blood sugar, okay? It's pretty simple. Carbohydrates all break down into sugar. And the reason is because carbohydrates are made of sugar. Basically what carbohydrates are is little molecules of sugar that have been clustered together into a piece of what looks like bread or cereal or fruit, okay? So after a meal, your blood sugar levels start to rise. That's natural and normal. And if you're having a lot of processed carbohydrates that are easy to break down, as an example, a Chinese fried rice based dinner, you're going to get a much higher spike in your blood glucose. Meals that contain more fat or more protein or less processed carbohydrates, they lead to less of a spike and more of a sustained release of sugar into your blood. Okay? So you're eating carbohydrate food, it ends up as sugar in your blood. This is completely normal. Nothing wrong here. Now, sugar in the blood is pretty fucking useless unless it can get to the places that it needs to go to do what we want to do with it, which is what? The muscles, the brain, the heart. Essentially, sugar is a type of petrol for your cell. It's a fuel for the cells of those organs. And so if it just stays in the blood, we can't actually use it. So we have this cool little hormone that comes along, and a hormone is effectively a messenger. Basically, it comes along like a chaperone. And the hormone's name, if you don't know, is called insulin. Insulin's job is to chaperone the sugar from the blood, unlock the door of whatever it's trying to get into. Muscles and organs like the heart, the lungs, etc. But in some people, the chaperone is just not very effective. Insulin doesn't work very well. It's almost as if it can't unlock the door to let the sugar in, so the sugar stays in the blood. So at this point, I want to do a check. Can you let me know in the comments, team, if you are with me? If you are with me and this is simple enough and it makes sense, can you please let me know? Because I don't want to get this wrong. This is really, really freaking important because I'm going to tell you now what the next steps are here. So, it doesn't work. So you want to think to yourself, okay, well, if the sugar's staying in the blood and it's not getting into the target destination, why is that even a problem? Okay, there's two things that's a problem here. Number one, I want you to imagine taking a cup like my dirty coffee mug, filling it with water, and then gradually stirring more and more sugar in. We're stirring the sugar in. What is going to happen to the water? Naturally, the water is going to become thicker. It's going to become more viscous, which means it's a little bit sticky, if you will, as it's trying to move through the blood vessels. Now, that's fine when it's moving through big-ass blood vessels like in your heart. But when it's moving to the tiny little blood vessels in your eyes, your kidneys, your fingers, and your toes, it really struggles to get through the blood vessels. Okay, so that's the first problem. This is the reason why in diabetes, when people have it, I always think about, and maybe, I don't know if it's like Vancouver's a healthier city than where I'm from, I'm not sure, but I always go down to the local shops when I'm at home and I see older folk riding around this on their like a mobility scooter, and I look at their ankles and I see the big swollen ankles. Most of the time that's because of diabetes. So what's happening is those little blood vessels of the feet, the blood can't get through the blood vessels, which brings the second problem. What happens is when that blood, that thick blood, can't get in through those little... It's like trying to think about putting a train through a tunnel, but the tunnel's too small. Okay? What ends up happening is, on the other side, those tissues, the muscles, the organs, they start to get starved of oxygen and nutrients. So if you starve, for example, a foot of oxygen and nutrients, in the early stages, what ends up happening is the foot starts to get a little bit of tingling. In the end stages, the foot just can't, there's no feeling in it. And it starts to become essentially dead. The flesh dies. And I remember occasions when I was a dietitian in hospitals of where one really familiar situation where an older fella with what's called, I'm not going to go into this, but basically diabetes and end stage issues with his feet. He couldn't feel his feet. His wife woke up one morning and could smell almost like a weird roast dinner smell coming from inside the bedroom. What it actually was that her husband, in the middle of winter, had used a hot water bottle. The sleeve on the spout had actually come back, exposed the metal lid, and his leg was lying on the metal lid, essentially cooking. He didn't know, but the flesh was dying because he didn't have any feeling in it. Ugh! Now, by this time, if you're sticking in this, you don't mind hearing stories, and these aren't pretty stories, okay? But this is what happens in the end stages of diabetes. So we have this starvation of the tissues from oxygen and nutrients, and then this thick blood going through the blood vessels, and that's a problem. So you might ask, why doesn't the insulin work? The chaperone, why does the chaperone that takes the sugar from the blood into the muscles or the organs, why does that not work? Well, there are exceptions to this. Around 10 to 15% of people that have what's called insulin resistance, in other words, the insulin not working properly, around 10 to 15% of people are healthy weight individuals. Oftentimes, not the greatest lifestyle, but they're healthy weight individuals. But the vast majority of people with insulin resistance simply have too much body fat. Insulin is effectively going to the door, and for those of you watching the podcast, not listening to the podcast, it's trying to get into the muscle here, and the fat is blocking the entry to the door. And so insulin can't do its job. Now what that means, this is called insulin resistance. So when someone is resistant to insulin, the body's response is, oh, okay, the insulin's not working, there must not be enough of it. So I'm going to make more of it. And then over time, insulin levels start to rise constantly because the pancreas and the brain are thinking, oh my God, there's just not enough insulin here. Eventually, the pancreas and the brain get to the point where they just don't work anymore. And so this is where it develops into uncontrolled diabetes. The sugar's just staying in the blood, it can't get out, and that's why you go to the doctor and you test your sugar levels. We're trying to keep our sugar levels in a normal range. Essentially, the insulin's not working, so it's indicating that that's considered now diabetes. Okay? So, the problem with this is that insulin not only is becoming dysfunctional, but also an abundance of insulin in the blood makes us hungry. This is important. When insulin levels continue to rise, we are hungry all the time and much more likely to store body fat. Insulin is the fat storage hormone. And so this becomes a vicious circle. We're eating more foods, typically a shitty Western diet, which triggers the rise of insulin. An abundance of body fat stops the insulin from working. Because we've got so much insulin, we're always hungry. Therefore, we're over-consuming calories and storing lots of body fat. And the cycle continues to get worse until the person loses a limb and eventually dies. Sorry to sound bad. Turn the podcast off if you don't like hearing it. But if this saves one person, I'm more than happy to keep going. Now, this is where the dietary guidelines of Western countries have just got it fucking wrong. They've got it wrong. Let me make this very clear. Carbohydrates are not bad, okay? If you've kind of got this opinion that, oh no, carbohydrates, I need to cut out all my carbohydrates, you don't. Carbohydrates are not bad. I personally love carbohydrates. They're the great thing about eating, right? And especially if you're a very active person, someone who does a lot of strength training or a lot of cardio, you need carbohydrates to fuel your workouts. But here's the truth. Unlike protein and unlike fat, which are both essential, you must have protein. The reason you must have protein is because everything in your body is built from protein. The reason you must have fat is because the majority of your hormones like testosterone and estrogen are built from fat. You must provide dietary protein and fat or you die. However, carbohydrate isn't essential. And this is what keto advocates cling on to. It's not essential, so we shouldn't eat them. However, I don't believe that. I don't believe that because it's not essential, we shouldn't eat them. I think that if they're not doing us harm, then why can't we include some carbohydrates? But not to the level that they are prescribed in the dietary guidelines of Western countries. They're far too high, off the scale, like 70% of your diet should be carbohydrate. Follow me on this, guys. If you're eating lots of processed carbohydrate, you're constantly spiking your blood sugar levels, spiking your insulin levels, making you more and more hungry, more likely to overconsume calories, and more likely to store fat. If you have this dysfunction with insulin and you're overweight, continuing to eat and live the same way that you currently are keeps you stuck in the vicious cycle. So what's the big issue here? Well, the first line of defense for most people is taking medication. Okay, that's the first line of defense for most people. Most people think, oh, I'm on the diabetes medication and therefore my diabetes is fixed. And if nothing changes in their lifestyle, what ends up happening is the diabetes medications, eventually they have to continue to increase them until they stop working. The person needs more and more medication, and then eating becomes it's a real chore because what you're trying to do is balance your blood sugar levels against the medication. Should I take more medication? Am I allowed to eat this many carbohydrates? It just becomes a shit fight. You think that counting calories is hard? Wait till you got diabetes and you're trying to count carbs. It's a whole nother level. The thing about this that's so sad is that this condition destroys so many lives, and it's nearly entirely preventable and reversible if people adopt a healthier lifestyle. What does a healthier lifestyle actually mean? It turns out that the great thing about diabetes management is that it's almost perfectly consistent and aligned with what you would recommend to the general population like you and I. There are essentially two things we need to get on top of. Number one, reducing body fat. Straight out, reducing body fat. This is why it's really frustrating when the message of, lose weight gets convoluted as fat shaming. Look, it's a really difficult conversation to have, but there's not a lot of extra benefits that are going to come with carrying a lot of body fat. There's just not. And one of the issues that you have is these metabolic problems. So the two things we've got to focus on is reduction of body fat and reduction of the spikes in insulin and sugar so that we don't store more fat and constantly overeat. Does this make sense? If you look at the national guidelines, the dietary guidelines, the recommendation is that you eat mostly carbohydrates. But if you are in Better Body Academy, you know that that's not the case. It's clearly not working. 2/3 of the world is overweight and 50% of the world has insulin resistance. So why is it still being recommended? Well, my opinion is that it's because the boards, the people on the boards that come out with these recommendations, it's highly political and it's a massive conflict of interest. I'll give you an example. There's a massive amount of money that is made by big pharmaceutical companies. When it comes to diabetes medication, along with heart medications, these are the top grossing revenue. I'm talking billions and billions and billions of dollars. So when you go to a doctor and he's got Jeff from Gosford, and he walks in and Jeff's got slightly elevated blood glucose levels, like trying to explain what I've explained to you here is just going to take too much time. Here, have a medication, go and exercise. He doesn't do it. He takes the medication for a while. Shit gets worse. Come back and see me in 2 years and he's got diabetes. So let me give you clear instruction on how I would be dealing with this as we pull this podcast to a close. If you have insulin resistance, sometimes called pre-diabetes, or you have diabetes, nothing will improve your diagnosis more than losing weight. If you can get rid of some of the fat that's blocking the receptors to the insulin will be more effective. Nothing can help. This is why the prescription of Ozempic, guys, in Australia by prescription, and nearly every person in America is taking Ozempic now, and it's a diabetes medication, first and foremost. The reason is because it helps you lose weight specifically. That's why it works. So the goal is to lose weight. Second goal is how do we not only lose the weight but adopt a healthier lifestyle? I'm going to give you the tick boxes. There are a number of things that you can do to improve your insulin sensitivity and decrease your risk of developing diabetes and the issues that go hand in hand with these. If my mum got developed with diabetes and she called me and she said, Jace, can you help me? This is what I would say to her. Mum, I love you, babe. Let's fucking do something about this right now. We need to, number one, set you up on a meal plan which is in a mild calorie deficit. No calorie deficit, no fat loss. So we would work out what we should set her calories at, and then what we would do is make sure that she's eating in that as consistently as possible. The second thing that I would do is increase the amount of protein and fiber that I feed her. The reason is because this is going to slow down digestion. It's going to put less spikes in insulin. It's going to make her feel fuller for longer, reducing her overall calorie intake and meaning she's not going to be as hungry. So at the same time as I'm increasing fiber and protein and potentially fat, what I would be doing is reducing the amount of carbohydrates, particularly processed carbohydrates that I would be feeding her. Things like bread and grains and breakfast cereals, for example. You achieve this whole thing by eating a more unprocessed diets. One of the greatest and simplest recommendations that I ever heard was, if your granny wouldn't recognize the food, don't eat it. Here's what happens. In our world, we eat the same amount of food, but that food is highly condensed in the amount of calories that are boxed up in it. And so we eat the food, but the calorie yield is huge. Marry that with the fact that we've got a pretty sedentary life. It's a shit fight. And that's why diabetes starts. So the other part to the equation is obviously adopting a more healthier lifestyle. Nothing rocket science here, is it? But taking a 15-minute walk after a meal actually improves your insulin sensitivity. So if you've got a really, really sedentary job, I would be in the habit personally of, if you've got a 45-minute lunch break, I would get my lunch down in 30 minutes and then I would go for a 15-minute walk after it. The research has shown that taking a walk after a meal, after dinner, after lunch, after breakfast, sensitizes your insulin. This is a good thing. It means that you have better management of your blood glucose levels. The second thing that I would be doing, hallelujah, is strength training. When you build more muscle, it improves your insulin sensitivity. Mark my words, guys. It is going to be the revelation of the next 100 years. If we can get people to build more muscle, rather than focusing just on fat loss, our health will skyrocket. Our cancer rates, our heart disease rates, our diabetes rates will all go down by building more muscle. And still, I will have people say, I don't want to get bulky. Ugh! Dude, I've been training since I was 10 years old with really good nutrition, 3 to 4 times a week, consistently. This is as big as I can get. You're not going to get fucking bulky. This is the sad state of affairs that we're presented with, guys. And I'm willing to be the coach that's going to come in and tell you the truth. I don't know if this podcast was good or bad, but I don't really care. If there's one person that listens to this podcast, if you think that this podcast would benefit someone, please go to my profile on Facebook and share them or tag them and get someone who is probably borderline diabetic to listen to this podcast. You might just save their life. I hope this has been helpful. Guys, peace out. It's been the Better Body Academy podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode. Okay, team, we are done. So, questions, if any, hit me in the comments, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions, team. If we've got none, we're good. I'm going to very clear and concise. Thanks, Woz. I appreciate you, mate. If there's anything, guys, that you want to ask in the comments, please flick it through now, and I'm happy to answer that at all. What's going on, Instagram? I hope you're good. Let me know if you've got any questions that you want to ask, guys. I'll wait for it. Any clarifications? Any bants about the origin? Thanks, Jace. JJ, you are on the mark, brother. I think if you have been diagnosed rather with diabetes or insulin resistance, and you are having the combination of Ozempic and lifestyle intervention, that's a fucking winner. I'll keep making Bernice listen to these. I think she needs it. Yeah, it's a challenging one, Tez. We always it's the ones we love that we want to help, and sometimes they just won't hear it. How does the 15-minute walk help? What's it actually doing? Circulating more blood. Yeah, so essentially when you lift the demand for glucose, right? It's pulling the glucose into the system, out of the sugar, out of the blood, and into the muscle cells. That's exactly right. So it's sensitizing the insulin. So it's helping to balance off the spike that's actually coming by saying, okay, I need you now, right? That's a really great question. That's exactly right. Okay, team, I think that's it. Peace out. Hopefully it was helpful. See you guys in the next episode. Peace.